Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
My need is such, I pretend too much. I'm lonely, but no one can tell. Oh, yes, I'm the great pretender.
And we're playing that iconic song here on Katz and Cosby because we know someone who seems to be pretending a lot.
Who might that be?
You know, it could be Kamala Harris these days. This is Rita Cosby. John Katz is off today, and we have Judge Richard Weinberg, Democrat, and also GOP chair for New York State, Ed Cox. You guys, what we just heard from Kamala Harris, we're already hearing from the Trump team. They're putting two letters. They're saying BS, because we can say that on radio, BS, and also using the term that it's Soviet. It's like Maduro from Venezuela. Ed, what did you make of Kamala Harris, her first big policy thing, talking about the economy?
Look, you're talking groceries that they are price gouging. Their profit margins are under 2%. It doesn't work. There's one of the most competitive businesses you can imagine is a grocery business.
You know, it seems like also that so much of what she is saying is this. She wasn't in the White House the last 3.5 years. She's like, I'm going to come in. I'm going to be tough. I'm a tough prosecutor. I'm going to go after these companies, as opposed to anything that she did and Biden did to create this. Judge, she was the tie-breaking vote.
Of course, all those inflationary acts passed by Congress, she was a tiebreaker. By the way, we start off the show with The Great Pretender, one of my favorite songs. But we want to create a song just for her called The Great Panderer.
Yeah, The Great Panderer.
Because that's what it's all about. Free stuff, free stuff, free stuff. Vote for me.
And look, she was a great pretender as a prosecutor too. The word is that she did not prosecute anything but a big political case in which she would be out front, but everyone else would do the work.
Yeah, and just like she said that she's the prosecutor on the border, she said she's going to go after the cartels. By the way, coming up in the show, guys, in just about a minute or so, we're going to be talking with John Solomon. He has some big news on a gang leader who actually committed 23 murders in Peru, and he got through our southern border, if that isn't scary. Also, we're going to be talking to Corey Lewandowski in just a few minutes. Corey, literally in the last hour or two, got named to come back to the Trump team. He's going to be playing a huge role, and he's going to be joining us live.
He is the man who took Donald Trump, who no one knew, through the primaries to success to be the presumptive nominee of the party. That was Corey Lewandowski.
And he is back now, which is a good sign for Trump, too, obviously, right, with his track record there.
For Trump.
And we also have Governor Patterson, who usually is with us in studio. He's going to be joining us live from Chicago to give us a preview of the DNC. We have Larry Kudlow talking about the economy, what we've just been talking about with Ed and the judge. General Blaine Holt talking about some new stuff, why Nord Stream 2 blew up, who was responsible. We're also going to be talking with Kimberly Strassel with the Wall Street Journal. She's got some blockbuster stuff on these protests. And also we're going to have a whole bunch more. One of the other thing, guys, too, is Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat, is now on the Trump team.
Now an independent. She left the party, but she debated Kamala Harris and
cleaned her clock.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now she's helping Trump with debate prep. What does that mean? That's also good because, listen, Kamala Harris is going to be a feisty debater. There's no doubt about it. She has been feisty in the past, but Tulsi Gabbard had one of those incredible moments knocking her down, right?
Sure. Substance will undo Kamala Harris.
So when the facts come out, is that your point?
Oh, no. In a debate, if you deal with substance, you will beat her because she's all words, words, words.
Well, speaking of words, I couldn't believe this yesterday, guys, that here is President Biden, who there's a new report out that says he's very angry with Nancy Pelosi and Obama and others because, of course, they dumped him. And his line yesterday at one of the rallies was, I thought, very unseemly. He called President Trump Donald Dump. I mean, it just shows how low they're going to go now, you guys. I mean, that's an incredible moment. And meanwhile, what does the media do when they go to Bedminster and ask President Trump, why are you so mean to Kamala Harris? Why are you so mean to Biden? I mean, you can't make it up.
Donald Trump may have alliteration, but it's meaningless.
Maybe he was thinking of dump. Maybe he was thinking of him getting dumped by his own party.
Right.
Projection.
Good call.
It's called projection.
Yeah, maybe it was sort of in his mind, right? In his mind. Well, joining us now, we've got some big breaking news. John Solomon is calling in.
Breaking news, WABC.
And joining us now here with some big breaking news is John Solomon with Just the News, the great investigative journalist. John, what's going on? You've got some interesting stuff on J.D. Vance.
Oh, yes. A scary incident just a little bit ago. His plane had to make an emergency landing at Milwaukee Mitchell Field, the international airport in Milwaukee, because a door seal had a malfunction. It's a 737 plane, and as you know, door seals have been a big issue. There's been some recalls and investigative hearings and federal investigations of Boeing over these 737s. The vice presidential nominee was able to land safely. They got the problem fixed. They sent him back up in the air, and he's back on the campaign trail. But a moment of harrowing concern inside the Trump campaign. A couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump had a similar plane problem and door seal, but he had to divert and land for a brief repair on his way to Montana. And so these things happen on the campaign trail, but a lot of people talking about that right now.
Yeah, by the way, thank goodness he's okay, right? Everybody's okay.
That's fine.
Okay,
they're back on their way. They're ready. They're back in the air already.
Awesome. And you have some new polls, some really interesting new polls.
A lot of people were wondering how long would the Kamala Harris honeymoon last. Now, with the media, it may last a little bit longer, but not with the American people. The race has swung a total of 6 points in just the last 2 weeks. On August 2nd, in the polls that have been done by the great pollster Scott Rasmussen, Kamala Harris was up 5 points on Donald Trump. Today, she's down 1 point. And when you take leaners, meaning people that are leaning towards who their favorite candidate but haven't committed yet, Trump is up 3 points, a sign that there's bigger energy on the Republican side and that Donald Trump is back in the lead. And the race has kind of been reset back now to June 27, just before that disastrous Joe Biden debate. Kamala Harris having a lot of problems in her rollout. The Waltz VP has come under relentless scrutiny because they've given us false stories. They've given us false statements. And that's caused the problem. But perhaps today was the roughest day of all for Kamala Harris. She hoped to reset the economic arguments for her and distance herself a little bit by the Joe Biden campaign, try to convince people she can get on inflation. Her idea was to impose price controls. And oh my goodness, did she get savaged from all angles, including from the left. Price controls, of course, are things that have started in the Marxist economy. They have never worked. And they're widely panned by both liberal and conservative economists in America. For some reason, she decided to go down that road. Even the liberal Washington Post slammed her, saying, hey, if you don't want to be called a communist, Kamala Harris, don't propose price controls, because that's what communists do. It's been a really rough day on a day she had hoped would be the message point on her economy and how her economy would be a little different than Joe Biden. It turned out to be different, all right, but more like a communist one.
And also, Trump is coming out saying it's sort of the Maduro economy. You also have some big stuff on Tim Walz. Interesting on the DUI. Some people are catching up to some of your reporting, John Solomon, real quick.
Yeah, listen, he hasn't told us the truth about it. It's a long time. He said he wasn't drinking that day. Well, he clearly was.
This is the DUI, right? DUI back in
1995. Yeah. And for years, he's gotten away talking about like it wasn't DUI. It was a misunderstanding. He blew above the legal limit. And I think that's one. But just a few minutes ago, the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, just announced that they're opening an investigation into Tim Walz's 30 trips to China and his connection to some Chinese think tanks that are tied to the CCP. This is not exactly what Kamala Harris had in mind when she picked Tim Walz. She thought she'd be getting a strong national security guy, but now his allegiance to China, his connections to China under official congressional investigation. That just happened about an hour ago.
Wow. So Congress is looking into those 30 trips from Tim Walz. Again, he picked the anniversary, right, to coincide with the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. This is wild. Before I let you go, John Solomon, other big, huge news, and this just reinforces why you don't have a wide open border. There's this guy is a reputed Peruvian gang leader. He was arrested in New York. And he was suspected of 23 killings, and he gets
In his home
released.
country.
Is that right? Explain how this happened.
He's been wanted for a long time. Somehow he shows up in New York on our territory. He's a gang leader, Gianfranco Torres Navarro, one of the more notorious gang members in the world, not just in Peru, but in the world. He's wanted for killing 23 people in his home country. ICE got him. They announced it earlier today. Torres Navarro legally entered the U.S. through the southern border in Texas in May, and he was arrested before being told to appear in court for immigration proceedings. And now they realize he's the bad guy they've been looking for, so they've got him in custody. This is a big win, not only for the United States, but for Peru, that has wanted to prosecute him and bring him to justice for a long time.
How did he get arrested? Explain to me, and also, how did he slip through? I mean, you got a guy with 23 arrests, John Solomon. Don't you think alarm bells should be running off?
You would think so, but listen, this is an administration that let the guy in that they thought was going to try to assassinate Donald Trump so they could watch him for a while, right? We got the Pakistani guy a couple of weeks ago. He's led into the country. Man, the border is not only loose and so easy to get through, but even when we get someone, we sometimes make decisions that have people in Congress scratching their head, like, why have we released 100 people on the terrorist watch list? After we stopped them, we let them into the country, according to Jim Jordan. Well, this guy got in as well, but fortunately, he's been arrested, and right now, he doesn't pose a threat anymore. Yes
or no? Did they know who he was, or was it that Peru didn't give the information? I mean, that's incredible when he crossed the border. Real quick, John.
It does look like they had a flag on him, so when he came through, they were able to grab him.
They were able to grab him later.
Yes, but they knew he was flagged. So, obviously he got in illegal to begin with. Could have been in the got-away areas. We don't know exactly how he got in, but eventually he's arrested in Texas. We think he was a got-away, meaning he got through in a place where he wasn't confronted right away. Then he's identified, he's arrested. Once they arrest him, they know this is the guy they've been looking for. They roll him up. But, hey, those gotaways are what we've been pointing at. That's a very dangerous pattern. People we don't ever see are getting in the country. Yep. They're often the people that have the most to hide from us.
Yeah, absolutely. John Solomon, wow, this is big stuff today. Thank you very much. We always love having you on, the great investigative journalist. Thanks for joining Katz and Cosby.
Yeah, great to be with you, Rita. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Wow. Big stuff. And joining us now is someone who has now been elevated to an even bigger position on the Trump campaign, Corey Lewandowski. He was Trump's 2016 campaign manager, really rode that enormously successful campaign, and now he has been elevated to an even bigger position back now. He's been sort of informally advising, but now elevated.
Yep. Never really left.
Never left, but now obviously in a much bigger role. Corey Lewandowski, welcome to Katz and Cosby. It's Rita, Judge Richard Weinberg, and also Ed Cox, and we're all excited to see you back in a big way on the campaign.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much. You guys have been so good to me. You've been my friends and stuck by me when a lot of other people wouldn't, especially you, Rita. You've been so good to me. And Ed, we've been friends a long time. And listen, we got 80 days to go. And anybody who cares about the direction of this country has to get out and do something, because that's all we have. And I told the president that I'm willing to put my family on hold and all the things that I think are most dear to me for the next 80 days, because I am so fearful of what will happen if Kamala Harris is elected.
Corey Lewandowski, we just were talking, as you may have heard, with John Solomon, and he brought up this guy across the border with 23 murders. He's a gang leader, busted in New York. And he talked about being, he believes, maybe part of the gotaways. This is like, the border issue is so enormous. Even the economy issue is so enormous. Crime is so enormous. And they almost couldn't be more stark in the way things have been handled and the way a Kamala Harris-Walz administration would handle it.
Rita, you hear all the time, I don't like either of the candidates. They're both the worst of the worst, et cetera. This election is very different. There can be no difference. There's no starker difference in their positions. Kamala Harris, the border czar, has advocated for and promoted open borders. Donald Trump has a history of closing the border and making sure that Americans are protected first. So whether it's an economic message, it is a homeland security message, it is a national security message. These two candidates have no positions which are similar at all, and Kamala Harris is now attempting to rewrite her positions that she took when she ran for president and to walk away from the positions she has advocated for while being the vice president of the United States. There is no clearer election in our lifetime. Sometimes the candidates are similar on certain issues. That is not the case here. Donald Trump has a clear vision of what we're going to do in this country for the next 4 years if he's reelected, and we're going to have economic prosperity. We're going to have a national security second to none. We're going to close our borders like every other civilized country does in this world, and we're going to make sure that our enemies around this world fear us and our allies respect us, because that's not happening anymore.
All right, Corey Lewandowski, let's go to Ed Cox.
Corey, you want to go to basic philosophy? We are for Donald Trump is for equal opportunity. She has specifically said she is for equality of outcomes. That's communism.
But, Ed, that's what she has learned from Joe Biden. When Joe Biden said his only criteria to pick a Supreme Court nominee was that she was going to be a black woman, then that is for racism, Ed. Why can't we just pick the best person for every job? This country was founded on the opportunity that everybody should be treated equal. White, poor, green, rich, it doesn't matter. You have an opportunity to succeed in this country if you're given a chance. And why is it that the only criteria that the Obama/Biden/Harris/Walz team thinks is important is either your race or your ethnicity? When did that become the determining factor if you were capable of doing something?
Yeah, great point. And as we're talking, we were just talking about the economy. Today, everything was going after business, as if business doesn't hire, millions of employees like there's some evil thing. They don't realize, doesn't anybody want to tell her sort of the trickle down effects? If you go after business, and many businesses right now are so tight on margins, the first thing they're going to do is start firing people.
Where do government revenues come from?
Well, here's the amazing part. She's never run a business, okay? She's been a public servant, so she's never had to meet payroll. Go talk to a business owner and think about the sweat equity that they have put in to create value. The nights that they had sleepless nights because they weren't sure if they were going to make payroll the next day, right? The anxiety and all of the sacrifices they make. Public employees don't understand that. Kamala Harris doesn't understand that. Donald Trump has signed the front of a paycheck to make sure that his employees are working and giving them good wages and opportunities. And look, I always say this, and I know people don't like it. Donald Trump is an equal opportunist. He hates everybody the same, and he loves everybody the same. And it doesn't matter what your race, religion, ethnicity, or creed is. He treats you the same. And I can say that as someone who's been part of this Trump world for almost a decade now, a long time. And I have heard story after story after story that will never be told by the media of the generosity of Donald Trump that he doesn't look to go and get credit for from people who will never want to tell their story. And Donald Trump did it because it was the right thing to do. Absolutely.
And by the way, also on military things, he has done so much for so many different groups through the years. I also want to hit on Corey Lewandowski, also the difference on fighting crime, because, boy, it couldn't be more, crystal clear. Trump is with law and order. You see all these sheriffs and today J.D. Vance standing, with all these law enforcement groups, standing for communities of all colors, races, creeds, religions. And then you've got Kamala Harris donating to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, and Tim Walz and his wife romanticizing as the city is burning down.
Yeah, but are you surprised? This is their true colors. This is who they really are, right? They can try and remake their policies, but the reality is we know who these people are. We know that Tim Walz is an avowed socialist, basically. Look, this is a guy, according to the Wall Street Journal, who doesn't own a piece of property, doesn't own a stock or a bond, doesn't own a piece of Bitcoin, has no tangible assets, lives in public housing, and has no pension? I mean, that's kind of remarkable to me for a guy who's supposed to be the CEO of a state. And, Kamala Harris, what has she done in her career? She has had the opportunity to go and be the attorney general and a U.S. senator, and Joe Biden picked her because he pledged that he would pick an African-American woman. I mean, it's just, I want to hearken back to the days of Martin Luther King when they said, judge me on the content of my character and not the color of my skin. And so from an economic perspective, Donald Trump has led. From a security perspective, Donald Trump has led. And Kamala Harris now continues to hide from the mainstream media. She said on the 8th of this month that she would hope to be able to sit down for an interview by the end of the month. how is the media not up in arms? Because I believe, by and large, most of the mainstream media is in the tank for her. They have completely given her a pass in a honeymoon phase, and that's why we're seeing this rise in her poll numbers, because they won't cover her fairly.
Yeah, Corey, did you see, by the way, the only interview she's done so far, it was Tim Walz interviewing her. They talked about like what food they ate. I mean, it is incredible. It really is. And you're right. The media needs to step up and do its job and demand answers, because if she wants to be president of the United States, she shouldn't be dodging reporters' questions. There's so many serious, huge issues. Corey, we love you. Congrats that you're even a bigger role. Trump is lucky to have you, and we love having you here on the show.
Well, thank you, guys, and please have me back soon, and we'll just spread the gospel about how important the next 80 days is.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely will have you back on soon, my friend. Thanks so much, Corey. Congrats.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And everybody, we're going to take a quick break here on Katz and Cosby. Larry Kudlow is going to give us his take on what Trump is calling the Maduro plan from Kamala Harris.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. This is Rita Cosby. John is off today. We have Judge Richard Weinberg, Ed Cox, and also now we have the nation's greatest economist. He, of course, hosts the super duper top rated show on WABC on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Larry Kudlow. Larry, what did you make of Kamala Harris and what Trump and others are calling, I'm using the phrase, the Maduro plan from Venezuela?
Yeah, well, price controls, it sounded a lot like price controls. And whether you're Joe Stalin or Fidel Castro or Nicolas Maduro, or this next one's going to hurt, but Richard Nixon.
I know. They were tried. The Congress gave him the power, temporarily put on price controls. He did it because they dared him to do it. And boy, you got double-digit inflation as a result when they were taken off.
I was just going to say, he took the words right out of my mouth. So
I know the history.
It didn't work. It did not work. It won't work now. And also, you read through the rest of this plan, it's just got all kinds of government directions, takeovers, tax credits. By the time it's all said and done, the price tag is probably going to be somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion, plus price controls. By the way, nobody knows what price gouging is. No one knows.
That's exactly.
It's indefinable. They've never said it. The San Francisco Fed did a study. They said it wasn't an inflation problem. The other thing that what Kamala doesn't understand is rising prices don't cause inflation. Inflation causes rising prices, okay? Inflation causes prices to rise.
And inflation is caused by $2 trillion deficits, and they've had a total of $6 trillion deficits over their last 3 years.
And she was the deciding vote on a lot of these ones. I mean, that was the interesting, Larry. It's like she sort of makes it feel like she's a bit of a bystander in this whole economic downfall that we've all experienced.
No, she was the deciding vote in 2021, March, of the so-called relief plan. And then she came back a year later in August of 22 for the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act. She was the deciding vote there. And, you just got a tremendous amount of spending, besides the price controls, tremendous amount of spending, and there'll be deficits and borrowing. It will not work. And in fact, it's not playing well. I mean, CNN's against it, and the Washington Post is against it, and some Democratic economists are against it. I'm not the only one. Conservatives like me are not the only people against this. And I think this was a huge mistake on her part, because it really does make her look like a big left liberal San Francisco progressive. I don't think she wanted that.
Larry, you brought up that CNN and MSNBC and all these others are coming out. Do you think that we'll finally see some of them take her to task whenever she finally gets to do an interview? Because here you have those networks saying this is not going to work. I mean, it's all over the place.
Yeah, I didn't say MSNBC. CNN, yes. Well, you have to get through the teleprompter. Right now, she and the teleprompter go everywhere together. So it's very hard to know if she'll ever meet with any press people. Maybe she will. I don't know. But the general public will see this speech and will see the bad reaction to it. At least that's my view. And I do not think it will be popular because the two big decisions she's now made. One is this lefty governor in Minneapolis. And the second one is this big lefty price controls government socialism on the economy. So she's no moderate. She's no centrist. And people are going to see that. And here's Trump, he's standing up every week, giving 90-minute press conferences without a teleprompter. And he gave a very good speech on the economy in North Carolina. Very, very good pro-growth, tax cuts, deregulation, drill, baby, drill. I think he's back on message.
Larry, one of the things, too, that we heard today from Kamala Harris, she used this. I agree with you. I think most people are going to see this and say, like you said, to the left, along with, again, Tim Walz, too, who was, again, same thing as you're saying. But she also really was swiping Trump. I mean, one of the things she said was, I'm for middle class. He's for big business. She also actually said that Trump wants to increase taxes on gas, food, and she called it the Trump tax. She said it would cost the typical family $3,900 a year more. Is that true? What is she talking about?
No, it's really phony baloney because they are trying to calculate, I don't know, a baseline tariff, which former President Trump has flirted with, but he seems to have dropped that in favor of a more targeted reciprocity approach to unfair trading practices. But even if he had a 10% tariff, he also has a lot of tax cuts that would cover any cost increase from tariffs. So this is all just Democratic pap. Look, Joe Biden spent 3.5 years accusing the Trump tax cuts only for the rich, and she's saying the same thing. Rich corporations, and they don't pay their fair share. The reality is it was the middle-class wage earner and it was the black and brown wage earner who benefited the most under the Trump tax cuts. Today's Wall Street Journal had a terrific long op-ed about that and the failure of Bidenomics. So she can say what she wants to say, but I don't think it's going to penetrate. People, I believe, would prefer to go back to the more successful prosperity of Mr. Trump. And I think that's going to be key to this election.
This is all a big political problem. She has gone for 28 days or whatever it was without saying anything of substance. And she's the presidential presumptive nominee. She becomes going to become the actual nominee of her party. And then she comes out with this, which is just far left stuff that doesn't work. Yeah. And she is going to get pilloried with this. Like, it took several months for Dukakis to be the liberal from Massachusetts, not for a stick. I think she's done the stick. She's done that in one day.
Well, I think that's an interesting perspective, Ed, because people are saying how she's had this honeymoon and it's going to continue through the convention. I don't agree. I think she's already peaked. So I think I'm in agreement with you. Again, she's had two major decisions to make. One's this guy Walz, who's a big lefty from Minnesota, a lefty and a phony, by the way. Second is this, socialist price control economic plan. And she's 0 for 2 strikes. And I think people are saying, wait a minute, kind of we liked it because Biden was out and but she's revealing herself. Each decision she made, Walz and the price controls, is right out of the left wing playbook. Yeah, and that is, she cannot say that she's a centrist, and that's the case. She's trying to flip flop into centrism, and she's not doing it.
The socialist from San Francisco is now a valid label for her.
Yeah, Maduro. She's making Maduro and Castro and all those people proud, it sounds like. Larry, thank you very much. And everybody, we're going to be tuning in. Huge numbers hitting the stratosphere, as John always says. Love having you on, Larry.
Thanks, Rita. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And everybody now, our Goya headlines.
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And here are the Goya big headlines of the day. Former President Donald Trump and Harris will debate each other at Philadelphia's National Constitution Center next month. ABC News host David Muir and Lindsay Davis will moderate the event, but the network has not yet said whether or not there'll be an audience. Meanwhile, vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz will face off in a debate on October 1st in New York, in a debate hosted by CBS News. And also, anti-Israel and pro-Palestine protesters aren't happy with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. Ahead of next week's DNC, the mayor enacted rules banning the setting up of stages, installing of temporary bathrooms, and a ban on sound equipment. And those are the big headlines of the day.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC. Breaking news, WABC.
And we go now to our gov on the scene in Chicago. The great former New York governor, David Paterson, who is now there for the Democratic National Convention. Gov, we're so happy to have you call in. I know you just got there. Give us sort of a preview of what's to come and your thoughts of landing there and what everyone's looking forward to next week. It's going to be a huge week for them.
Well, it's starting, there are people who've shown up early and are, anticipating, what's going to go on at the convention. It's pretty quiet. But what I'd have to say is there is a palpable sentiment that's blowing in the wind, and it has to do with these protesters who would do anything to try to make names for themselves or to humiliate the Democratic Party. And, and I think right now, really, as Americans, it's kind of like what the Prime Minister of Israel said when he was here, which is that it's not Israel versus Hamas, it's good versus evil. And in this case, I think it's not Republicans versus Democrats, it's good versus evil. In other words, whoever wins the election and after you count the ballots is one thing, but what we're seeing is some kind of activity that almost claimed the life of the leader of one of our parties and threatens the convention of the other party. And I think it's pretty outrageous, and I think that the mayor of Chicago did the right thing. He expanded the perimeters of where the convention will be at the United Center so that the protesters can't get close and disrupt the events. And apparently they're mad at him. Good. They should stay mad at him. He should widen it even more.
Absolutely. Governor David Paterson, I was at the Republican National Convention. Ed, of course, was there too. And there was such massive security because it came, soon after the assassination attempt of Trump. How massive do you feel like the security is there? Because, of course, the stakes couldn't be higher. And you think we were just talking about the open border earlier. There's so much concern of these, the protesters, the Antifas and the pro-Hamas protesters, but also there's a lot of, foreign cells and potential for that, too.
And I think that that's what we've got to do in terms of finding out who these protesters are, where they get the huge amounts of money that it takes to bring in, porta potties and all these other things that they do, where they're almost, in a sense, setting up an office right around where the convention center would be. And it's very dangerous. It's really something that I don't think it would be too bad if a congressional committee was formed to investigate it, because I don't get the impression that people who just, happen to have sympathy for Hamas or whoever it is, it's much more difficult what they have been able to accomplish and where and who is making this happen, I think needs to be exposed.
Absolutely. We're talking to Governor Patterson, who is there in Chicago with the DNC starting on Monday. Ed Cox, you got a question?
Governor, you brought up an interesting point. Johnson is not Mayor Daley of 68. I'm sure he has some sympathy with the people who are outside are going to be protesting. How do you think that plays out over the 4 days of the convention?
Well, I think what he's doing, Ed, is what you've seen some other leaders do. They don't wait for the crisis. They plan for it. And so he's got areas cordoned off already, and they're watching people going in and out of there because, they go in and then it's 2 or 3 of them. Then next thing you know, it's 250 of them and it gets out of control. So I think he was totally right to do it. And I think he was also totally right to publicize that he was doing it so the people who live in Chicago feel safe and the people who are watching the convention from all around the country don't have to see a terrible incident that I'm sure many of these protesters wouldn't mind staging.
Yeah, let's pray that everybody is safe. Keep us posted, please, Gov, and I hope you can join us on Monday, too. It'd be great to have you.
Well, absolutely. I'll talk to you all soon. Everybody have a good weekend.
Oh, thank you so much. Governor David Patterson there at the Democratic National Convention gearing up in Chicago. And let's pray everybody again is safe. We're so great to have him. How wonderful. And now let's go to Brigadier General Blaine Holt, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, former C-17 combat commander, also former U.S. Deputy Military Representative to NATO. General Holt, there is so much talk about what happened with Nord Stream 2. That, of course, was the pipeline that was supposed to be Germany and Russia. It blew up a couple years ago. And now suddenly a Ukrainian has been arrested for it, has been tied with it. But it looks like the President Zelensky of Ukraine is saying, no, we didn't really want this to happen. What do you know?
So the timing of this Wall Street Journal article that reported all of this, and it's great to be with you, Rita, on your show. The timing is so much more interesting than the article itself. The article is dubious. I'll tell you that a yacht, the amount of explosives required to do such a thing, the operational rehearsals. We have underwater demolition professionals that train for this type of mission every day, and they would do it tons of times before they would ever attempt such a thing in raging seas at 70 meters depth around this. And so I'm not sure why this narrative is being pushed out at this particular time, except to say that it's in someone's best interest to have a story about Nord Stream get out there and release. But the idea that this is the way it happened is just absolutely nonsense.
Really interesting. Judge Weinberg.
Good to talk to you again, General. I want to ask you about this. What are your thoughts about the incursion by Ukraine into Russian territory? Is that a game changer, and what does that mean?
It's going to change the game one way or the other, and it could be a masterstroke on behalf of the Ukrainians if, and this is a very big if they understand that they have a limited time up there. They can't hold that ground forever because they've got logistics supply lines that they've got to protect going up into Kursk. And already we're seeing evidence of very, very good strategic signals from this incursion into Kursk. One of them is Belarus's Lukashenko just announced today that he believes Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine should get to a negotiation table and stop fighting. That would not happen without this Kursk thing. But my worry is if that's not what this endgame is, Ukraine does not have the standing army to go ahead and hold that ground. And right now you see the Russian army is pulling frontline units off the line of contact, and they're getting them ready for redeployment towards Kursk. So they should take these wins and these gains and convert them to a strategic goal or win that can get everybody to a off-ramp this war.
Ed Cox.
General, could this create, General Supreme Allied Commander Cavoli was here. He couldn't talk about it for confidentiality, obviously, top secret, but he indicated there are other intents of what was going to happen here. Could it be that this is creates a more mobile contest between the Russians in which the Ukrainians would do much better than trench warfare?
Well, everybody, Mayor, is always going to do better in any form of warfare except for trench warfare. The thing that's been misapplied during this entire war has been air power. Those of us, including me, who in the early days were arguing for a no-fly zone to limit the killing, well, we were bombasted then, and now we don't look so stupid. But getting things mobilized and moving is great. But again, an army lives on its belly. And if you don't have the bacon, beans, and bullets to supply that army deep into territory. Now, what has just happened is amazing to me. The two key bridges going into Kursk were just blown. And so now I'm wondering, does that leave the Ukrainian army with an aerial resupply option only? We're just going to know tactic by tactic as they go what their plan is. And to what General Cavoli is saying, I am certain there are many other elements and chapters that are yet to play out or that they're considering playing out as they try to get this place to an end state. But what I pray is that this isn't just leading to more warfare for warfare, that we're actually heading to a place called off-ramp.
Yeah, let's pray for everybody's sake. Boy, that would be great if there's something that could be a resolution. Let's pray. Thank you very much, Brigadier General Blaine Holt. Love having you on.
Pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. And everybody, after the break, we are going to be talking with Kimberly Strassel from the Wall Street Journal. She has some new details about some of those protesters we were talking with Governor Patterson about. She's going to tell us who's headed to Chicago.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. John has the day off. We continue with the great Judge Richard Weinberg and the great Ed Cox, GOP chair for New York State. Now let's bring in Kimberly Strassel of the Wall Street Journal. Kimberly, we just talked to Governor Patterson, former Governor David Patterson, who's on the ground there in Chicago. And he said, boy, they are gearing up for a lot of these crazy protesters. You wrote a really powerful column about how the Democrats, there are so many sort of the radical left, and many people would even put Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, in that category.
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, if you look at these groups that are saying they're going to come, the coalition to march on the DNC, there's 150 groups, but what's not getting as much attention is that there are some others that are outside of that coalition, outfits like Samadoun and Behind Enemy Lines. These are things that agitate for direct action. They have been busing people in. They are giving them training sessions. They're talking about getting into the streets to shut down Genocide Joe and Killer Kamala. A couple of them have posters out saying, make it great, like 68. So everyone's making it very clear that they intend to actually go a bit wild out there. And this has been coming for a long time because this faction of the party, Democratic leaders did not tell them no when they got going back in the wake of the George Floyd moment. And they haven't been told no up until now. And this conflict has been coming, and it's likely to happen next week in Chicago.
Judge Weinberg.
Kim, that's exactly right. As I read your column today, I said, absolutely. What they've done is they've created their own monster. They haven't reined these people in. They haven't condemned them. In fact, they've been apologists for them, Kim, all these many years. And they continue to be apologists for them. They looked the other way in the demonstrations, in the attacks on the Jewish community in the colleges. They explained away it was no big deal in Minneapolis when it was being burned down. It cost $500 million. You have a governor who's not going to run for vice president. Said nothing wrong with it. His wife likes smelling the tires. I mean, what's wrong with these people?
Well, absolutely right, Judge. And, the reason they didn't shut it down in the beginning is because they wanted it to happen. They complemented their theme of racism and disorder under President Trump in 2020. And here's the thing that also is mind-boggling to me. I was just hearing some Democrats on television. Of course, now, belatedly, some of them are saying, this is outrageous. This is a very small faction of radicals. They're not representative of the Democratic Party. I don't know how you can say that when clearly those voices were what made Kamala Harris choose not to go with a Josh Shapiro because he was Jewish. and because these groups, that element of the party said no. So you can't pretend they aren't part of your coalition. You can't just adopt them when you want them to and then cast them out as something you don't recognize when it's useful.
You know what? The other thing, too, Kim, as we're talking about all this stuff, Kim Strassel, I think about two moments. There was one where Joe Biden, he got interrupted. It was at a church. And he's like, no. Let that protester who's saying these horrible, vile things, let that protester speak. It was almost like condemning people for trying to get rid of the protester who was disrupting.
And showed sympathy for the...
Showing sympathy.
He showed sympathy. He didn't just say, let him speak. He said that they have a point.
Yeah, they have a point. And Kamala Harris, Judge, did the same thing just recently. Somebody interrupted her and she said, I respect your opinion. As opposed to get the heck out of here. I'm talking to these people about something important. I mean, it's like they're embracing them, to your point.
Well, and by the way, I would lay down on the train tracks for the right to free speech, but I think what's been confused, in particular by Democrats.
By the way, I wouldn't lay down on the train tracks, but I might come close. But go ahead.
Well, I'm a big libertarian that way.
By the way, I am too. I just am scared of train tracks. But go ahead, Kim.
I love train tracks, so that's probably the difference maybe between us. I might do it just for fun, nothing to do with free speech. But anyway,
you're great. Thanks.
Carol's a Pauline on the train.
She's a diehard. She's a diehard.
And that's fine, but I think what Democrats and these leaders are failing to make the distinction between, and this gets really key because it gets to what was happening on campus. Sure, everyone has a right to peacefully protest within the bounds of the law. It's also nice when they occasionally also have some respect for other people's space and for good manners as well, too. But what was happening on campuses was not peaceful protest. It was harassment. It was the shutdown of campuses and whole areas of it. It was being unlawfully camped against the rules of the campus. This was not what's happening. And they sort of condoned that for a while, saying everyone should be able to engage in protest. If people aren't going to stand up and make the moral distinctions between peacefully protesting and breaking the law, that just shows a lack of leadership at the top level.
Although, did you see the other day the praying grandmother who was out at January 6th? She's now going to have to serve jail time because she was near the Capitol on January 6th. This woman who was talking, she was in the Capitol, I think, for 10 minutes. And yet these people that you talk about, they get a free pass.
Well, and that has been, look, this all ties back into the other headline of this week. Minouche Shafik, who was the Columbia University president, she's resigned. And, you know, one aspect of this is that even when some of these college administrators dared to actually stand up to these protesting, demonstrating, law-breaking students and interlopers on their campuses and call the police, a lot of them ended up getting get-out-of-jail-free cards. There was no ramification. They weren't even suspended or barred from school. I mean, what kind of message does that send? And if they wonder why more and more mobs of young people are coming to Chicago potentially to engage in similarly unlawful behavior, it's because the message that gets sent by this from the top is that there are no consequences for that.
Yeah, that is really scary. Wall Street Journal, Kimberly Strassel and Cox.
Kim, I've got a big question for you. Going back to my first convention, 68. And I always wondered, why do the protesters go to the Democratic convention and not when we in the Republican side really disagree with them the most? Why aren't they protesting at the Republican convention?
Be careful what you wish for, Ed.
Yeah, exactly. Don't invite them, Ed.
How do you explain that, Kim?
Ed, so I think that's an absolutely really insightful point. And here's my response. I was reading a good piece in The Nation this week, which obviously is a left-wing publication, and it quoted one of these protesters, demonstrators, and she said it very succinctly. She said, the Republicans are never going to listen to our ideas, but we can force the Democratic Party to change. In other words, they don't care about this election that's coming up in November. What they see here is an opportunity to revolutionize the Democratic Party from within and take it over and force it to adopt its positions.
Yeah, they know that they can at least hold some sway. And look, you brought up the classic point. She had a choice of going with Josh Shapiro or a Mark Kelly. and she picks Tim Walz. And we were just talking about that earlier, Ed, that look at the two choices she has made so far, the two sort of big decisions. One was picking Tim Walz, who certainly, who loves smelling the tires when her city is burning, in the riots of Summer of Love, as he calls it. And then the other choice is today she comes out with, the equivalent of the Maduro, Castro plan. I mean, Ed, what does that say to you?
And this puts her clearly in the far left. Why did she do it? It does not make any sense politically.
Well, and again, you cannot make these distinctions. Okay, they're now trying to suggest that the people are going to show up next week in Chicago are some radical fringe. These are the people that they're no different than the squad members. They're no different than like prominent members of the Democratic Party in Congress. And they actually do represent a very large and influential bloc. It's still a minority, but it's an influential and loud bloc in the Democratic Party, which is the progressive side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see what happens. Look, I hope it's safe. But you're right. They have certainly with their words.
I got to go there. So. Yeah.
Oh my God. You got to call us. Give us a call from the scene there too, Kim, please.
We'll do that. But I'm not going to go anywhere where to have a lot of action.
Yeah. And stay away from train tracks too. Okay.
Exactly.
We love you. Kim, thank you very much. Kim,
Thanks.
great column.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. The great Kim Strassel there with the Wall Street Journal. Wow. Let's see. Let's pray it's going to be calm there. You talked about 68, Ed. This may be sort of the same feel again.
Same feel, same things happening.
Wow.
And she made a very good point. They want to persuade the party to come, and they are in part persuading it, as the judge made that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, what do we all stand for? Truth, justice, and the American way. Pray for America. Let's pray it's calm in Chicago, guys.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.